What's up, everyone? Today we have an awesome guest on the show, Frank Schaeffer. And Frank is a New York Times bestselling author, artist, film director, screenwriter, and public speaker. And he's a son of the late theologian and author Francis Schaeffer. And he's also appeared on Oprah, The Today Show, BBC News, and many other media outlets. So Frank, it's good to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for talking to me, Josh.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I first heard of you, several years ago when I was back in Bible school. I was more familiar with your father, though, Francis Schaeffer, because I attended Bible University. Have you heard of that?
Yes, in fact, back in the day when I was in the evangelical world myself, we're talking 35 plus years ago, I actually was with Dad one time when he was speaking at Biola.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't even know he spoke there. Okay.
Yes, I believe he did. No, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
we were on a California kind of thing, and he spoke at Biola and then up at Westmont and a couple of other places, and I forget what year that might have been, but we're talking the mid to late 70s.
That was back in the day. So, and as you know, it's like Biola's like a hub for apologetics, and so your dad was known for that. At least that's how I knew who he was. And his name would come up here and there in our classes. But I remember when I first heard your name come up in class, it was sort of shared in like a negative light. So, because like being that my school was strictly evangelical, one of my professors talked about how, Frank Schaeffer, the son of Francis Schaeffer, has joined the Greek Orthodox Church. And then we were like, oh no, and it's like you are lost in our eyes. And it's funny because like, even though the majority of us had like no freaking clue what the Greek Orthodox Church believed, like I didn't know what you guys believed, all we knew was that it was a bad thing, at least to many of us.
When you said that the first time you heard about me in class, you figured it was a negative context, I was going to say, hey, well, what was my wife doing there telling you about me? But
exactly, right. And but that's just like the perception that a lot of us young evangelicals had of the Greek Orthodox Church. It's like we were so naive of it, but it's like we're told negative things about it. And
but of course, the thing you ran into very early there was that a bad sign in terms of the evangelical community is how it tries to protect itself by shutting down questioning, by either demonizing people before you can even see what they actually wrote or said themselves, or whole other groups or institutions. So, let's not just talk about it. Let's just have nothing to do with it and stick to our own kind. And of course, that doesn't speak very well, when it comes to apologetics of being able to defend your faith or argue it.
Exactly. And I love it how you're just talking about like, what would your wife say, and so that's one of the things of like what my wife would tell me when I lived in the Philippines. A lot of people would stay away from me because they were warned about me, stay away from Josh. They were warned about me in their meetings. And when I was actually dating my wife, actually before I got with my wife, I was asking her, if you were to get with me, you better be ready, and she said, Josh, but I know your heart. So these people who say all these things about you, it doesn't matter because I know your heart. So I feel you on that, and so.
But the thing is that when it comes to these kind of spiritual journeys, obviously when you change sides, I mean, you essentially do something that scares people who are part of an establishment that only exists if everybody stays with the program. And so, I have experienced this over the years because not only did I go into the Greek Orthodox Church, if you think about the 30-year trajectory since I've been in the Greek Orthodox Church, now, I'm writing books like my latest, which is Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God. And with titles like that, you obviously scare the hell out of people. They want to find out, what's going on. And at the same time, they're being warned off even reading from people who are so worried that they're thinking, gee, we don't even want to influence people to read this book, even in a negative way. So better yet, let's just ignore it and not talk about this guy at all. And that's really the bottom line with a lot of the inner workings of evangelicalism is essentially, you're either part of it or you are being attacked. But if you wander away, their policy is, less said, soonest mended. They just don't want to even know about it.
Exactly. I did read your book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God. And let me just say, like, I love it.
I'm glad.
I really love it. I was even telling my friends yesterday, he was a former Biola student, and I was telling him to read your book. And, I love the humor, the insights. Right. And, for me, honestly, I love the honesty. You know, like how raw
Well,
you were.
maybe we should just get you a couple of cases and you can give them out at the gate of Iola.
Oh,
And
I
then,
know.
presuming you within a half an hour, you can catch that plane back to the Philippines and just get out. But
It sounds
do it on
good,
the
you
last
know.
day around.
Yeah, you know, because I just love, you know, I was telling my friend from Biola yesterday, like it wasn't necessarily like the philosophical stuff, you know, that you talk. It's just your story. I thought that was so powerful. You know, you were so raw. You didn't hold back with your mistakes, you know, of how you were just growing up, you know, as a young father. You know, so you basically just shared your story and your evolution of where you're at today or where you were at, you know, at the time you wrote the book, because obviously things could
Right.
change. You know, but I would love for you to share your story with my listeners, you know, so but like, what was life like for you growing up, and how are things
Sure.
now?
Well, let's work backward from today. Okay, so right now I'm 63 years old. I have three grown children. I'm a grandfather of five grandchildren.
Mm.
Two of them are grown grandchildren, because if you get your girlfriend pregnant when you're 17 and she's 18, and your first baby is born when you're 18,
Yeah.
that child has a daughter when she's 22. You do the math, and my oldest granddaughter, who's now 22 years old, Amanda, who's studying sociology at the University of Helsinki in Europe, she's the age of the kids of my friends who all waited around until they were in their 40s to even think about having a child. So it's
Right.
funny, because I just generationally, my grandchildren are the ages of my friends' kids. And then when it comes to my youngest grandchildren, Lucy, Jack, and Nora, whose ages are 7, 5, and 16 months, they actually live across the street from me, and they are the children of my son John, who was in the United States Marine Corps, fought twice in Afghanistan, once in Iraq, came back alive, went to the University of Chicago, married Becky, had these children, and now Jeannie and I do childcare for them. So if people ask me, oh, what do you do? And I guess, if you're going to go speak at a college or something, they talk about you being a New York Times bestseller, et cetera, kind of how you introduce me. But let's just start right now with the present. I'm a stay-at-home grandfather who writes in the morning. I get up very early to write, do my painting as an artist, do some blogging, do some editorial stuff, does some media appearances. But really what I do is take care of these little kids, speaking about where our hearts are at. And my priority in life right now is really looking at what I want to pass on to them. And I think the bottom line for that is I want to pass on to them a belief in the intrinsic value of beauty, period. That essentially not everything has to be for a bigger cause. Not everything is about making money. Not everything is about being philosophically correct. Not everything is about education and jobs. Bottom line, unless you are chasing the intrinsic value of beauty and believe in it, then you are not going to have a beautiful life. And the purpose of life is life itself. It's not to do something with that life as if there's anything more important than life. So that's kind of where I start. Now, if you roll the clock back, I was brought up in the Brie Fellowship in Switzerland. I was born in 1952. And really, speaking of change, my change is not as dramatic as my parents' change. When I was a little kid, I remember my mom and dad were strict fundamentalist evangelical Christians. You only played certain music on Sunday. There was no jazz or rock and roll. They, there was a strict dress code in the house, a lot of talk about modesty and all the rest of it. By the time I was 16, it was more usual to find my dad in an art museum giving a tour to students of the work of the artworks of the Italian Renaissance, or doing a lecture on the lyrics from Bob Dylan's latest album, than giving a Bible study. And a lot of people who associate him with the rise of the religious right because of what he got involved with later with his stand on abortion don't understand that if they had checked into La Brie Fellowship when I was 16, 17 years old in 1968, 69, 70, they would have thought they had arrived at a hippie commune with some sort of evangelical work. They never would have mistaken it for a Christian community in the way that, say, the evangelicals would think of a place like Gordon College or Wheaton or Biola or Westmont or any of these other institutions. It was really a free place where my father, for instance, was very welcoming to gay couples who came, didn't try to break them up, allowed them to share bedrooms. We're talking 68 here, buddy. This is not politically correct modern stuff. when kids came in who were taking drugs, nobody got kicked out. We had kids who had been on heroin. There were guys from the British rock and roll business coming through, asking questions about Christianity. So that was kind of phase 2. And then phase 3 in his life, in the last 6-7 years of his life, after he made a movie called How Should We Then Live? And then another movie called Whatever Happened to the Human Race, both of which I produced and directed with Gospel Films, and we raised millions of dollars to make. That's what put him on the big-time evangelical map. Before that, he was barely known to most evangelicals. And after that, because he took a stand on abortion, he got associated with the religious right. And all of a sudden, I found myself as his nepotistic sidekick. You know, I often say that only in North Korea or the British royal family do sons and daughters inherit the ministry the way they do in evangelical circles. But here I was in Jerry Falwell's borrowed jet at the birthplace of the moral majority in Lynchburg, speaking at his college, flying around the country, doing huge events. I was the keynote speaker at the Southern Baptist Convention one year to 23,000 pastors, all because my last name was Schaeffer, and so was my dad's. And then when my dad died in 84, I really had a change of mind. I looked at this subculture that hated movies and hated the music I liked and hated just about everybody I loved, whether it was gay friends or people who were into feminist ideals and these kinds of things. And I really couldn't see spending the rest of my life in this kind of cultural backwater that seemed to be against everything and was sort of xenophobic and paranoid on top of it. And I started questioning a lot of stuff. And therein started a journey where a lot of shook out that you already mentioned a little bit. Jeannie and I started going to a Greek Orthodox church in 1989. I got out of the Christian business altogether. I started making some feature films in Hollywood that were not terribly good, but they were paying work that was not in the Christian environment. And then I wrote a couple of novels, the first being Portofino, which got great reviews and found a lot of people who wanted to read them. And that kind of liberated me altogether from what I'll call the God business. And after that, I kept writing books, and I've written a lot of fiction and nonfiction books, and some have been more successful than others. But bottom line was I had unhooked my wagon entirely from the evangelical subculture. And then in my mid-50s, a lot of people kept asking me, when are you going to write a memoir and so on? And then I wrote a big, thick book called Crazy for God, which became a bestseller and really told the story of my own journey, but also my family's journey, my dad's journey through the religious right and the rest of it. And the email traffic that got kicked out of that, both from Christians and the new atheist movement and everybody else, kept asking me questions about what I kind of believed. And so a snapshot of that journey is my new book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, that you referred to and said you liked. And that really is an attempt to let people know, look, instead of coming up with the right ideas about everything, let's start with the truth. And that is, life is a series of paradoxes. And you either embrace the paradox or go crazy. And it's not just about religion, whether there's a God or not. It's everything. It's parenthood, it's education, it's family, it's love. How do you define these things? And if you try to come up with a sort of an apologetics approach of arguing quote unquote truth about everything, and here's where we stand, it really doesn't work out terribly well, because we all change our minds and we all learn more. And we're very different people at one point in our life than we were at another. So that's kind of brings us up to the present. And like I say, I take care of these grandchildren every day. I show them a lot of art. We make beautiful things together. We go places, and we listen to music. And basically what I'm trying to give them is, first of all, unconditional love. My ambition is to be unconditionally trusted. And what I want them to learn from me is not a bunch of theology, but I want them to learn that A, they're loved, and B, that life can be beautiful if you believe in beauty rather than believe in being right all the time. But instead chase beauty. And so, my life has had a huge shift in emphasis, but the funny thing is it really ties back also to what my parents were doing in their ministry of L'Abri, where they lived beautiful lives. They kept their door open to strangers. They took care of people other people rejected. They cared for the needy. They tried to answer questions as best they could. They put a huge emphasis on art and creativity. We had musicians and artists and poets and writers coming through by the score who found my parents really understood them. And so, when it comes to the theology, yes, it's a long journey. When it comes to my own kind of aesthetic preferences, I think I'm very, very close to where my parents raised me to be, and really went with that aspect of who they were. So, here I am still on that journey, and who knows where it goes next, but that kind of is a long, long thumbnail sketch of it.
Right.
That essentially puts in a capsule something like this memoir of mine, Crazy for God, and of course brings us up to where I'm writing this book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God.
Yeah. No, I love the whole emphasis on just like love and beauty and taking care of your family and stuff. But I did find the title, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, very intriguing for me personally, and
right
in the book, you say that you hold two ideas about God like simultaneously, right? That he or she or it exists and doesn't exist, but for me, I'm okay with it, right? But I could just imagine, like the critics say, hey, that's a contradiction, and, aren't those two things mutually exclusive?
Of course it's a contradiction. And the point is, it is a contradiction because life is full of contradictions. Let me give you another one. And I think I talk about this in the book, but here's the truth. You and me are talking today. We're both biological machines. You're made of carbon-based matter and water. So am I. There's nothing in our bodies that is thinking in itself. And yet the sum total of your parts look out at the world through what I'll call spiritual eyes. Okay, right. Go figure. You're a biological machine looking at the world with a sense of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
How do you figure that? Let me give you another example. I love my wife, Jeannie. We've been married 45 years. I don't know who that rotten kid was that got her pregnant. What he wanted, I'm not sure, but I'm not that guy now. On the other hand, we still have huge fights. We had one just the other day, actually. We fought on and off for 3 days about the stupidest stuff. And then it all resolved and everything was fine. But hey, if someone said to me, Frank, how can you write a book called Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God? That's illogical. I could write another book saying why I love my wife and hate her. Because depending on the day.
Exactly.
Sometimes love means you hate the person you're with a little less than you would otherwise, and you basically, there's enough love left there to bring you back together, but it sure is impossible to come up with one description. Love sometimes is passionate sex, love other times is bringing your wife a cup of coffee in bed, and other times it's just when you walk out of the house, slam the door and drive off, and you're furious and you're never going to come back. You do come back.
Yeah.
But all of those things are love. So you could write a book, Why I Love My Wife and Hate Her. You could write a book saying why I adore my children and they infuriate me. You could write a book saying why I'm loyal to America and pray for its destruction. I mean, seriously, think about everything in your life you care about, and I'll try to come up with a one-size-fits-all definition. And I think the same is true of faith.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've said anything unusual. Why I'm an atheist who believes in God. I remember talking to Billy Graham, the evangelist, when I was a kid, along with my dad, when my dad was dying of cancer in Mayo Clinic, and Billy was saying how much he feared death and didn't believe in heaven. This is the same guy that has preached a whole lifetime. Now, there'd be two ways to read that. You could say he's a hypocrite, but I don't think so. I think he was actually in a truthful moment, and basically you could talk to people who are pitching anything, whether it's supply side economics or carbon-based oil is going to save the world or global warming. But in the still of the night, whether you're in love with your wife or believe in God or believe in your job or love the country you're in, there is no such thing as unalloyed loyalty with no doubt. Yeah. And so I'm not just talking about doubt. I just go a step further and say, hey, let's be truthful. Not only is life a journey, including spirituality, no one is of one mind. And all these Bible verses to the contrary about being lukewarm and you got to stick with it, that's all very nice in terms of propaganda. Truth of the matter is, Jesus is there on the cross saying, why have you forsaken me? He's not there saying, I'm trusting in God's great plan for my life. And then I'm looking at my life and saying, well, to be truthful about this, there are big chunks of time I'm an atheist, and there are other times I feel like a believer. And the difference between me now and then is I don't try to sort it all out and make it fit any more than I try to explain my relationship with my wife to a young married couple that says to me, hey, how have you guys stayed married 45 years and you're good friends with all your children? How did you do that? And my answer to them would be, one day, 1 hour, one decision at a time. There's no seminar or book you can read that's going to give you the answer. It's a series of millions of small choices made day by day. That's the truth of how life is. Forget theology and philosophy. And one of my arguments with philosophy and theology is they discuss these subjects in a vacuum as if they're not part of real life. Well, in real life, it's never either or. Give me a break. It's always both and a mixture, and you learn and you think you've made your mind up, and then you realize it was all bullshit, and you move on from that. That's how life actually is. We all know it. So, I don't think I'm saying anything unusual, but the title was chosen deliberately to provoke a discussion. And I guess finally what I'd say about the title, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, it's an anti-labeling title.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Joshua, I've never met somebody gay or straight or bisexual or black or white or Jewish or Christian. I've only met human beings who are conflicted about every aspect of their personality, their body, their life, their history, their genetic makeup, their background, just like I am.
Yeah.
So all these neat labels, oh, he's transsexual. No, he's not transsexual. That may be an aspect of his or her personality.
Sure.
But that's a full human being with hopes and dreams and fears and prejudices, just like you and me. And they're going to change their minds as they go on about all sorts of things. So I just don't buy these shorthand labels.
Oh, for sure.
I wrote a book trying to blow that concept out of the water, beginning with the very title. So I love it when people email me and we say, you can't be an atheist who believes in God. And, my answer to them is, hey, you are many things as well. And if we're going to go by labels, then not only does all discussion end, but it's a lie, because nothing is as simple as the label.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I feel you on that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're different things on different days, and we have all these contradictions going on in our head, and tension going on. But I want to know how did this bring healing into your life though? So I feel you, right? So I'm just asking you questions that I think my audience will ask. But how? I mean, but doesn't certainty give people hope? You know what I'm saying? Okay, so there's an afterlife.
I'd put it the other way around. I'd put it this way. I think certainty is an addiction. I mean, seriously. I think we change our brains. I mean, neuroscience these days with scans and everything shows that, for instance, music grows children's brains differently than kids who are deprived of music, et cetera, et cetera. We know this. And I think that an addictive personality manifests itself in various ways. And I think the kind of people who wind up at Biola studying apologetics and really think they're going to get anywhere with it, when they look back when they're 60 years old, my age, they're going to realize that they were sold a bill of goods of certainty addiction. That really doesn't work out. So, I think that, Hugh Hefner sits there in the Playboy Mansion trying to have sex with 18-year-old twins, and he's pushing late 80s. Well, good luck. I mean, keep doing that. But your certainty addiction of thinking what you need is young flesh your whole life to have sex with. Yeah. Doesn't build the sort of relationship that I treasure with my wife, which is built on fights and resolutions and getting old together and a real life. And I'd say the same about theological certainty addiction. If you're going to latch on to the sort of Jesus saves paradigm and think that's going to solve all your problems, and somehow from then on, eventually what you have to do is just shut your brain down and turn into a real fanatic to maintain it, which I think is one reason the religious right and the right-wing fundamentalist movement is so opposite of everything Christ taught and is diametrically ugly so much of the time, precisely because they can't afford to open their mind to the real possibility that the whole thing is bullshit. And so they don't have the common humility of questioning themselves, that if you look at a marriage, for instance, or child raising, the parents that do well are the ones that turn around to their kids once in a while and apologize and say, I learned something, I was wrong, and ask for some forgiveness. The assholes out there who are fathers and mothers are always the people who are sure they're right about everything. And, or I'll put it another way. Nobody ever blew up a mosque or an abortion clinic or ran their plane into the World Trade Center after yelling, hey, but I could be wrong. Yeah. And think about that. I mean, who would you rather be on a desert island with? Or more to the point, do you want to become the kind of person who you'd want to be on a desert island with? And if you're a certainty addict with all the answers, you're exactly the kind of person most of us dread sitting next to on an airplane.
Right. Exactly. So how does this all play out in your life, right? So practically speaking, you mentioned, some days you believe certain things and other days you believe other different things, So you mentioned prayer in your book, sometimes.
But let me just back off a second. Okay. I don't think belief is where anything happens in anywhere in life, religion or otherwise. Who cares what you say you believe? What matters is who you are. Okay. And it's the same with parenthood. I mean, who gives a crap about what your theory of parenthood is if you're slapping your kids silly or walking out on your children and not paying child support?
Right.
You know, and if you want to talk Christian here for a minute, I mean, look at the teachings of Jesus to the Samaritan woman at the well. He says to her, she says to him, "What are you talking to me for? I'm a Samaritan. We hate each other, and you're a Jew." And plus, he's a male and she's a female, unattended in the Middle East. I mean, this is the Middle East 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
He says none of that matters. Gender doesn't matter. Religion doesn't matter. Day is coming when, you know, when what God wants is not correct theology or where you worship or what church you belong to, but it's in spirit and truth.
Right.
Well, you know, what is the truth? The bottom line of all truth is who you are and what you do, not what you say. So what I don't understand about evangelicals is they treat theology like a magic bullet. If you say the right words, you're in. Jesus is always saying, I don't give a crap what you say. It's who you are. And if you look at the way Jesus parses the gospel all the time, they're always coming to him saying, but the law says what you got to believe is this. And he says, I don't care about the law. Here's what the law says. But then there's this operative word of his, and it's an important big word. He says, but here's what I'm telling you. Right. So, you know, Jesus would have made a very bad evangelical, because Jesus basically says, I don't care what the Bible says you're supposed to believe. I'm telling you what you've got to do, who you've got to be. And all I know is that testing that idea in real life, you get a whole different result than if your theory is correct. So how many jerks do we know who theologically are correct? How many elders and how many churches are crap fathers? How many mothers have broken their kids' backs with one too many Bible study or a little pietistic saying? You know, how many churches are just a veneer of respectability and underneath it's all crap? Yet, you know, at least in my experience, how many times have you known an atheist or an agnostic or a Jew or somebody from a different background or a different denomination who doesn't have all the fancy words and the theology right, but treats you like a human being?
Sure.
So when I look at my whole, you know, this whole parameter here, once again, I don't think this is a departure from Christian teaching. I think it's an affirmation of it to say correct belief is not the point. And let's look at something else. If salvation depends on correct belief and sincerity, how do you know you're sincere enough? And if everybody did, why do all those people keep going forward at evangelistic rallies, having already done it a dozen times? Sure. Secondly, you know, in their quote-unquote recommitment to Christ that Billy Graham always asks for, which just seems like insane nonsense, as if Jesus is keeping a list or something. And then if sincerity isn't it, then how about correct belief? Look, I don't know anything. I mean, I basically know enough to buy a washing machine. In other words, minor household appliances. But that's it. How do we know anything? We don't. We go by trial and error. And yet, so how do we look for whether we're living a life that we should be living? And I know this sounds a little bit like Oprah Winfrey and so forth and so on, but I'll put it to you honestly in terms of this time of life as a grandfather. Yeah. You know, I don't look in the mirror of the Bible for correct teaching. What I look for is what I see in the eyes of the people who know me best, the children I take care of. Do I see trust, love, and an absence of fear and happiness there? That tells me a lot more about my spiritual life than a theological laundry list that I'm going to sign my name to. And I look back on the days when I was a Calvinist Christian young father, jerk, slapping my daughter at an 18, 19-year-old father who knew nothing. I had correct theology. In fact, I believed I should be the head of the home, discipline my children, tell my wife what to do, because it was all in the Bible, and that's what I'd been taught, blah, 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 blah. And it resulted in me being a royal asshole. Right. Now, who would you rather be on an island with? A guy who believed all that shit? Or somebody who said, you know, I don't know, but I do know this, that when I see unconditional love and trust in the eyes of a grandchild, that tells me more about who I am than matching my beliefs up to a list. Right.
No, for sure. I mean, but obviously, though, beliefs do matter, though, right? So, like, even though
beliefs matter because our ideas inform us. And I've been expressing a belief right here, and that is, of course, it's a belief that you embrace paradox, that you unhook yourself from addiction, of certainty. These are beliefs too, but there are beliefs that are more or less poisonous.
Exactly.
to the people around us. It isn't that you're saying, oh, I don't believe anything. Of course you believe things, but, embracing paradox is another kind of a belief. But I think it's less about belief than actually trying to have our experience of the world match what's actually out there.
Sure.
And there's this idea in ancient theology that I talk about a little bit in my book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God. I mention it there, and I've gone into it in other places in more depth, and that is this concept of apathetic theology, or the theology of unknowing, where you don't try to describe the character of God. You sense God's presence through his energies, not through what you say about God or the theology. And so, an example of that would be seeing the goodness of God in creation. An example of that would be seeing the forgiveness of God in the experience of forgiveness from your wife or your children, whatever it may be. So for me, it's just that we're looking for these beliefs in the wrong places, where if you experience the energies of God in your actual life and in your prayer life and so forth and so on, it's a completely different thing than coming up with a theological list that you then go study apologetics so you can defend it.
Right.
Somehow this is an aggressive sort of campaign of getting other people to believe right, as if that's what anybody's judged on.
Exactly. No, and that's one of the reasons why I liked your book so much, because you just shown how you haven't figured it all out. Things could be kind of confusing, but your beliefs did change in the sense of, who cares about all these theological beliefs that the evangelical church said, this is what you need to believe or else blah, 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 you're going to go to hell or you're not saved or whatever. So, your beliefs changed to the importance of your family, looking into, their eyes and just knowing that you're loved or something like that, or taking care of your grandchildren. Because sometimes, just as I was talking to my buddies yesterday, it's like, we studied all this theology for so many years and you can still act like an ass, and stuff like it doesn't even matter, so I'm just thinking about how so much has changed for my life, on how I was always trying to get, cross my T's and dot the I's, just making sure everything's perfect, just to make sure that I'm on the right track. And that's why I was just sharing your book to my friend yesterday, and how maybe those things aren't as, important as we thought that they were, and that life is a journey and some things are mysterious for us. And there are other things that are more important, instead of trying to figure out, these certain doctrines, like who cares about predestination, and so that's one of the things I love about your book, is just focusing on like now. And I think you even share stories about when you were mowing the lawn and something like that, or talking about your grandchild, and that's what I really love. So you mentioned also that you're an artist, which is really cool. I've seen some of your works on Facebook. So if you guys haven't seen it, you post your paintings once in a while. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
FrankSchaefferArt.com if you want to go look at my spring show right now and some other things. And it isn't choosing one or the other. It's just, this is a whole life. And I painted when I was younger, and then I left that to get into the evangelical thing, regretfully, but came back to it about 10 years ago and have been painting. And then for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been showing some of the work and selling it on FrankSchaefferArt.com. And it's great. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to reach out through the internet and meet people who are interested in your work.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your book that, as a painter, that you feel like you're connected to something bigger than yourself, like whenever you paint. But, would you call that experience God? Because how would you?
Yes, I would. And, I was watching an interview yesterday, actually, with a fantastic French classical pianist by the name of Hélène Grimaud. She's really great. And this interview was being conducted by Deutsche Grammophon Records. I think she's just released a whole series of recordings of Brahms piano concertos, and she's a big Brahms aficionado. Somebody asked her about Bach, and she was saying, well, Bach is really the beginning of everything for me, and if there's anything in my life that points to something bigger than us out there somewhere, call it God if you want, it would be when I channel his music. Now, art has a way of doing that to people, so I'm not unique in that sense, but I must say, the experience of painting and say growing some flowers in my garden, that I've planted with my grandchildren as bulbs in the autumn, and then picking a few and dragging them into my studio and painting them in the spring. That kind of cycle of life is, for me, where I experience a sense of spirituality, truth, and beauty that I don't find ever in terms of theology.
Okay.
Never.
So you basically find meaning in your existence? Like, is it something that we create? Or we discover?
I'll put it in a different way. I think theology and apologetics and evangelicals think that the proper response to God is, hey, explain everything so I can explain it.
Yeah.
How about cut to the chase and just say thank you?
Exactly.
I mean, to me, that to me is where my own spirituality really means something. It's the sense of the desire to express gratitude.
Yeah.
So when I get up in the morning and I pray for my family, for Jeannie, Jessica, Francis, and John, Amanda, Ben, Donnie, Lucy, Jack, Nora, and Becky, that prayer is not only for their well-being. I am listing what is close to me that I am thankful for. In the same way that when I look out at the view out of my window at the marsh I'm looking at right now on the Merrimack River in Massachusetts, I'm not sitting here thinking that the only response is evolutionary psychology to figure my brain out, or molecular biology to figure the marsh out, or physics to figure out what sunlight is. Those are good questions.
Sure.
But the first thing I feel is just gratitude for the light that's going through my eyes into my brain that is forming a picture of what's around me, and what a great ability to be able to see that, and what a pleasure and a joy this is. So again, I come back to what I've been talking about, and that is, if we're not pursuing the intrinsic worth of beauty, then basically we're telling God, if there is a God, hey, shove it. We don't care about the creation here. What we want to do is get our answers right, because really we're just pain in the ass teachers' pets who want to put up our hand first and always get an A on the test. Well, if that's what spirituality is, you can keep it.
Oh, for sure. For sure. No, and that's why I liked your book so much, because just you talking about beauty and love. And to me, that's been like my evolution of just, as you know, since I came from Biola, I don't want to judge everyone was just like me, but I just got so caught up in theology where just things could just end up being so dry for me. Instead of realizing just the simple things in life about like my family and love and beauty and stuff like that. And so, I'd like to get to this question. Why did you join the Greek Orthodox Church? Do you still go to church?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm there every Sunday with with 3 of my 5 grandchildren. I take them every Sunday. Of course, reasons shift. Back in the day, part of it was that, I was brought up in a church and I missed that, but I was done with the evangelical approach. And so I really like ancient liturgy in the same way that I prefer Shakespeare a lot of times to modern plays. It's a matter of taste. But I think the big issue for me is that the approach of liturgical mystery holds up better than a bunch of theological sermon-based teachings. If I want another sermon, I'll go to a college and listen to lectures. But what I prefer is a liturgical practice which is both beautiful and changeless, so that you can find a quiet space, as it were, to really get in touch with something bigger than yourself, and to have a community, but not in the sense of making everybody think the right thing, but really in participating together. So for me, church is going to liturgy, but it's also doing dishes at midnight after the food festival, which is our fundraising event, and sharing that with the rest of the community. It's having a place to take my grandchildren where people watch them grow up and know them and love them. There's a lot more than theology involved. So it's not why do you go to church as in what do you believe? It's why do you go to church for the same reason. You could say, well, why have you stayed in the same house for 35 years? Because I've worked here. I know my neighbors. I've planted things I know where everything's growing. There are trees that are now 50 feet tall that I planted, etc. It's a whole life pattern. And for me, I love the liturgical life of the Orthodox Church. It's not something based in American Christianity. It's ancient, it's universal. It ties into some of the most ancient practices of Judaism as well. I just feel much more at home there than, in the kind of church of what's happening now, which I just got royally sick of, and I'm done with that.
I mean, so I get that. But
I'm not telling anybody else they ought to do that, or they're lost if they don't.
It's just something that you like.
I'm just giving you my personal reasons.
Yeah. So I mean, but initially though, it was more of like a rebellion, right? Like, because you just wanted to get away from evangelicalism.
I don't think it was a rebellion. It was more of a hunger for something more than what evangelicalism offered you. Yeah, politicized right-wing evangelicalism, and yet, I still had that spiritual hunger. I wanted to be part of a spiritual community, and so I just happened to start going to an Orthodox church and found myself very happy there. I mean, for one thing, they had no knowledge of the world from which I came, so I didn't have to continuously be kind of rehashing that.
Okay. So I know you enjoy like the liturgical stuff, but you're obviously like hearing messages there,
Yeah, but I mean, they're very brief. They're based on the
Okay.
gospel reading. I mean, there's a lectionary. All four gospels are read in their entirety in
Mm.
small passages through the year, and the priest always talks for 5, 10, 15 minutes about the passage. But the main service, the hour and a half liturgy, is in the passages of the scripture being read, the ancient prayers of the church, the chanting, the singing, the presentation of the Eucharist. This is stuff that would be familiar to anybody who had studied any church history.
Sure, sure. Okay. Um, I loved how you talked about your wife in the book. She seems like an awesome person.
She is an awesome person.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to meet you guys one day, face to face. In fact, like when I was reading your book, just when you were talking about your wife, it actually got to me like a lot. And when my wife woke up, she saw me reading your book, and I actually put my book down, and I just gave her a big hug and just started to appreciate her. I mean, that's how much your book affected me. And
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
yeah.
That's the best thing you've said all day.
Thanks. I know your marriage hasn't been perfect. Obviously, whose marriage is perfect, but you two had something real. There was pain, but there was also genuine love. However we define that. But how has your wife reacted to your evolution of just things changing for you? Is she on board
Listen,
with your?
like I say, I got her pregnant when we were 17 and 18. We were together since we were 16 and 17. We are like kids who grew up together. We're joined at the hip. There's no daylight at all. I mean, one of the reasons our fights are so terrible when we do fight is we know each other well enough to know exactly where the jugular vein is, and we can go for it at the flip of a switch. That's the downside to a long relationship. The great upside is that we really have tracked and grown together. So that
That's beautiful.
this crazy journey, and it's nothing to do with a technique or a method or that we're good or special people. It is to do with the fact that we were just very fortunate in that, when I married this beautiful San Francisco hippie princess who happened to stagger into my parents' ministry, I didn't know who she was and she didn't know who I was. We were just boyfriend and girlfriend. But it turns out that as life has gone on, I'm lucky because my wife is a very serious, dedicated person, but also really wonderfully, really wonderful person with not just a sense of humor, but loves her sexuality and enjoys, being with me. And we both love the same things. And our idea of a great time is no big fancy thing. It's just a glass of wine in the kitchen while we're cooking and taking care of our children and then our grandchildren and having a good sex life. She's a real good basic person. But then on the other hand, she'll read a book and tell me what's interesting about it. And so, we've been tracking on that as well. And when it came to all my twists and turns, it isn't that she's kind of followed along. She's taken her own path, but we've wound up very much of the same mind on a lot of things. We're a real team.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No, I
that's
love
just
that.
luck.
I love
I mean,
that.
we're just lucky that that's how it worked out. Because who knew who these kids were?
Yeah. No, that's cool because like even yesterday, I met up with two people. We were both talking about their relationships. One was married, one was ending a relationship, and I was just telling them about how my own marriage has been, and people look up to us for some reason, but I tell them about how we fight. We even had a fight just a while ago, and it's like it gets ugly sometimes, and people don't see this side of me. In my
Absolutely.
obviously in my public speaking, they don't see this side, but even though we have these big fights, it's that love of just knowing that we're gonna reconcile again because we just love each other, not because the Bible
Right.
says, but we just love each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And I
That's
just
just
love that about
is what
how
it is.
your book you were able to show and just the humanity of all of us. That
Right.
a lot of authors wouldn't dare say. And which is why I admire your courage for doing that. But what's next for you though? Are you working
Well,
on
I'm
anything?
working on another. I'm painting a series of paintings right now
Oh,
that I'm
okay.
actually collaborating with my granddaughter Lucy. She's copying some of the iconography in the church in a very child's hand, and then I'm taking her basic drawings and turning it into painting. That'll be an autumn
Oh,
show.
nice.
And then
Okay.
I'm also working on a new book, which is really about this idea of the intrinsic worth of beauty and family life as seen through the eyes of a grandfather. So I'm kind of going to that stage of my writing now where I'm folding some of those experiences
Awesome.
into a view of art and music and life and children and sex and all the rest of it.
Nice. How old is Lucy now, by the way?
Lucy's 7.
7. Oh, okay.
7, and really lovely. And of course, she lived in my house when she was born for 2 years before they moved out. And so she and I just bonded like crazy. I mean, she would nap in my arms, and we've spent hours and hours and hours every day of the week together since she was born.
Awesome.
I
Beautiful.
pick her up at school every day. I make her her snack. She hangs out in the afternoon. I read to her out loud. We do art together. We're really good friends.
That's awesome. Yeah, because you mentioned her a lot in the book, so that's
Yeah,
pretty
well,
cool.
she's my buddy.
Oh, how can my listeners keep in touch with you? What's your website again?
Well, there's various ones. First of all, they can go to my Facebook page, Frank Schaeffer, and they can. It's sort of, I don't know what they call it, a fan
Is
page or
that a
something.
fan page? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, you just
we can
like
link
that.
that up. We
You're
can
on.
link
And
that
by the way, I answer all my messages on that page. I don't mean just comments. I can't do with all those. But if anybody messages me on that page, I answer it
for sure. For
on
sure.
on my Facebook page. And then there's frankschaeffer
.com.
.com.
Okay. And that has your artwork
.com.
too? That's your
And
artwork?
then frankschaefferart.com.
Oh, okay. So
So there's
frankschaeffer.com.
frankschaefferart.com, frankschaeffer.com, and Facebook, and then I have a Twitter thing too. So
So
I
you're
answer-
everywhere. You're everywhere.
Yeah, and if you go to my Facebook page or my art page and you want to get in touch with me, my email is listed there. It's just frankaschaeffer@aol.com, all one word, Frank A. Schaeffer. And I answer my emails, unless it's just too abusive, I'll mostly get back to people.
Right. And you recently did a talk for Google, right?
Yes,
Okay.
they have. That Google has a sort of their own version of TED Talks called Talks
Right.
at Google, and I did one for them at their Cambridge headquarters, and then they simultaneously they simulcast that to all their offices around the world. It's on YouTube right now, and again, you can go to my Facebook page and click on it.
I'll be posting the links, so don't worry about it. I'll make it easy for everybody.
Thanks, and
You
if
know.
you send me a link to this interview, I'll post it on Facebook.
Oh, for sure. So you guys check out his book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, and check out his future works and his paintings that he already has. So Frank, it's been a pleasure, man. Just thanks for being you and for just sharing your story and your heart, and thanks for being on the show.
Joshua, my pleasure.
For sure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That was such a dope interview. I love Frank's honesty and where he's at on his journey. Just wanting to keep things simple and seeing how a lot of certain types of doctrines and philosophies just seems unnecessary and can sometimes even be poisonous to our lives, which is why I love his emphasis on love and beauty. So don't forget to purchase his book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God. You can get it on Amazon as a paperback or even on Kindle. Also, if you're into audiobooks, remember I teamed up with audible.com and you can choose from more than 180,000 audio titles from there. Now that's a lot, right? And you can download any of them absolutely free with a free 30-day trial just so you can check them out. Just go to www.audibletrial.com/flipside. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/flipside for any free audiobook of your choice. So go check that out. And if you enjoy this podcast, consider supporting me on something called Patreon. Remember, it's like a tip jar saying, hey, Josh, we appreciate what you're doing and we'd love to keep this show going. And so, any support would really mean a lot to me, guys. And as some of you know, my wife and I were moving back to the Philippines in a few months. Not visiting, moving. And so we're taking everything with us, including the books I've written, because we'll be selling them over there, while we're in Asia. And but while we're still here in California, and if you'd like to have a signed copy of my first book, So You Thought You Knew Letting Go of Religion, with me personalizing it to you with your name, you can order it directly from me, on my website, and I'll have it shipped to your door. But keep in mind, this is only within the U.S., okay? It's only in America that I'm going to do this, not out of the country, because the shipping's going to be too much. So I'll be putting a link in the show notes of how you can order one book or even a bunch of them in case you want to buy some for your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. And I've been getting so many private messages and comments from people on Facebook who enjoy the show, which is really encouraging. And if you could just do me a favor, instead of thanking me just through emails or private messages, which I do appreciate, of course, I'll write a review and rate it on iTunes instead, because that'll really help out the show when it comes to ranking so more people can discover it. And trust me, I read all of the reviews, and sometimes they really get to me and inspire me to keep pumping out more of these episodes for you guys. So if you can do that, and of course please share this podcast with your friends. Alrighty guys, once again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. I'm out. Peace.